I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today on our Salesforce user adoption. Where do you start conversation? I'd like to introduce you to Niraj Garg, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Aplusify. And my name is Rob Haas, and I am the founder and Chief Data Evangelist of Sphere Data Solutions Group. We're excited to talk a little bit about Salesforce and user adoption and what you can expect from the start of the journey to launch and everything in between. If you have any questions along the way, please submit them and we will cover them as checkpoints. So to really start out, we wanted to focus first on what is Salesforce adoption and break it into three different areas, and that's onboarding, that's tracking, and that's optimization. This is really meant to not necessarily be something that we're walking you through a formula, but more of a conversation. And we want to address, from my experience, taking it from both corporate and spending 6 years in the association world at an association called PCMA, and having lived through a Salesforce onboarding, really what that means from my experience, and that's the experience of being a chief technology officer for the organization, the experience of working with outside resources, and the experience of really taking an organization through a journey of what we would say that's very common to most organizations, and that's after years of being in a particular CRM, having a lot of legacy processes built up, and having done business the same way for many years. What does that really look like? And how does that impact the organization, and what does that mean for future growth of the organization once you're up and running? So from the first point, and really talking about the onboarding, that we have here just simply stated how new users get on Salesforce. And this is the point that I think that we just want to start out with here, is that oftentimes within organizations, particularly within the nonprofit and the association world, the organization can be divided into technology, into membership, into events, into marketing, into education, and the use case is often quite different depending where you are in the organization. And something common that I've seen is that sometimes there's that feeling or that thought process that not everyone needs to be in Salesforce, depending on what they're doing. And this is a point of emphasis that as we talk about the success, we talk about how users get onto Salesforce. There's really kind of two tracks here. One is getting total organizational adoption to the platform, and that's getting everyone in a very systematic way, but through that process, really defining the user story, and the user story by functional area, because everyone will have a much different use case, and how does that story come together? How, if we were to say that the customer is the center of the universe, how do we design processes that work fluidly with the system as it was designed, critically evaluate what old processes may have been in the old system, and does that need to come into the new Salesforce system, and really identifying not only a really robust training and ability to bring people into the system, but what the key outcomes are, and defining that at stage one of anything that you do. Niraj, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
I think you have hit the bullseye, Robert, because onboarding is a very important process in the whole new adoption. And when we mean onboarding, I think onboarding should actually not just start once we have implemented Salesforce, I think onboarding should be a process which we should start right from the point when we are in the implementation stage. So I think we can onboard some power users, maybe from different departments like you were talking about, because we will have market stakeholders from marketing team, we will have stakeholders from business team, sales team, who are actually using the system and want to understand where we are migrating the new system to. So if we can maybe pick up or onboard some power users from each of these departments and maybe ask them to test the various stages that are there in implementation, I think that would actually help them to gel with the system more. And once we actually implement the entire system and move it to production, I think they will not find it as a surprise or a shock on what has been implemented, because they have been involved in that journey of uh, testing the system, knowing what modules are there, and slowly and steadily adopting it. And if you are able to do that in terms of the power users, I think once the implementation has been done, they can involve other users and train them on how to use the system. And I think their feedback would actually help the implementation team as well in terms of what we are doing right, what we are doing wrong. So I think onboarding should not just happen after implementation. It should be an ongoing process that should take place right from the word go. So
I agree, and
yeah,
that's a great point. And in my days at PCMA, it was we called that group the Salesforce super users, and it was really the train the trainer model, where you had that subject matter expert within each department to be able to represent the processes and challenge the status quo, and really come up with workflows that worked well. The that leads into tracking, and that's, simply put, it's let's look at the user adoption. Let's look at how people are interacting with Salesforce, and that could be simple as how do people enter information into the system? Is there standard operating procedure that's been effectively communicated? To the amount of times that someone's actually properly using the system to measure the customer experience, to access educational tracks, all the way through reporting, and developing reports and processes that are really meant to support the organization. From what we'll get into the next is an automated fashion, but really identifying all the key points throughout the customer journey, along with the standard operating procedures internally, and really creating that audit trail to say that from start to finish, we've got total adoption internally. Number one, we feel that the train the trainer model is highly effective across all departments, and that we are now using the software as it was designed to help really create those, what we probably want to call our lead and lag indicators throughout the different steps of the organization and their journey, to be able to help grow and make impact to all the key and critical stakeholders.
yeah. I think just to add on to it on this tracking stuff, based on our experiences, Rob, of working with various clients in this Salesforce adoption process, where we find that people are actually glued to their existing systems that they have been using, because they find that comfort level within that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to shift to a new system, because at a certain point of time, sometimes people don't want to learn, right? It's like if you are living in a house for maybe more than 15 years, and then someone just asks you to move to a new house all of a sudden. you will have that kind of resistance, and you are not prepared. So I think it's the same here, where if people have been using their old system, it takes a bit of uh, initiative from the people who are actually building the new system to involve them, show them how the new system would actually not be harmful, but I will actually help them and streamline their processes, automate certain things, reduce their time of doing certain things, improve operational efficiencies. And I think that is a slow activity, right? It cannot be done in day one or day two or day seven. It has to be a gradual process, which would take maybe some weeks or maybe some months to get to the level where maybe 50% or 60% people actually start using the system on their own. So I think that journey is something that we have to do together, not just with the technical team, but with all the users who are actually using the old system and want and are very critical in the adoption success rate. So if you are able to convince them slowly and steadily, I think that will set the success criteria for the adoption process.
I agree. It's the crawl, walk, run approach into it, particularly depending on how long the organization was in another system. That timetable has to be taken into consideration. And then when we look at optimization, I feel that this is best described as the engine's been built, the engine starts, and now we're going to get into the fine tuning. And the success around this particular stage, I feel really comes from two areas. One is the user feedback, and getting the critical stakeholders and their teams in the platform, using it, letting their team know what is and what isn't working. But I'm also thinking of it as creating that user workflow and beginning to identify, what are the manual tasks, what are the manual touch points, and a critical part to this is having a team, a highly technical team that understands the platform, that they're going to be able to support the use cases, number one, that come to their table, their desk, but two, having the ability to really demonstrate a level of understanding that if this is the key outcome that we want to achieve, these are our 2-3 options in terms of developing a more user-friendly interface, customer experience, behind the scenes automations, but driving really towards, I often like to say, what are the fewest amount of clicks we can design a page to be in order to optimize for the user experience and yet offer the richest experience. And that simply could be as it's easy to buy to extremely robust reporting on the flip end.
Yep, I think that's true. And in terms of optimization, as you pointed out, that it's a mix of automation tasks and manual tasks. And obviously, if you have a highly technical team that understands the entire implementation process, they would take care of the optimization right from the start. So they will make sure that the processes that are repetitive, right, are actually automated. So as an example, if we have divided the implementation process into different phases, your test cases would be repetitive, right, for every stage. If you test it on sandbox or whether you test it on production, there would be a repetitive process. And maybe if the team is technically capable, they will actually automate these test cases and automate the entire testing process. so that it's easy for everyone to test it out, and you just save time on that. So
Mhm.
you just have to make sure like what can be optimized and what is something that requires manual effort and will take more time.
And that's a great point, and that goes actually back to the super admin group of the power users of Salesforce, because through the onboarding process to optimization, the whole process of continuous testing, continuous onboarding, it actually never stops. Particularly because Salesforce and other like platforms um, usually have scheduled updates all the time. And whether it's a patch, whether it's a major spring or fall release, those types of changes coming to the system, depending on the level of customization you may or may not have built around certain processes, or you're using the platform straight out of the box, that continuous testing and keeping the team engaged for that optimization is really important.
That's true.
All right. So as we look at thinking about why is Salesforce important, and whether you're a deeply integrated user, or this Salesforce is new in the organization, hasn't really engaged in this type of platform before. The I like to say that it's a white canvas with unlimited potential. And looking at the different use cases across the organization, these are what we would classify as four very common pillars of why Salesforce is important. And again, a common theme is that we want to put the customer at the center of every experience that we do. And just referencing back again to the previous slide, it is really important to keep that customer in the middle, really important to think out these processes, because it will impact not only your internal customer, but the external customer as well. And so, starting with the user productivity, I think we can all agree that we're in a state that we need to do more with less, and just using the current employment situation of the Great Resignation. I think most organizations have experienced having to pick up more, due to the traditional length that people are in roles isn't really following the same model. Teams are shorthanded. We need to move faster. The customer expectation to get information in the now is real. And so that really speaks to enabling the users to be able to again have fewer clicks to gain access to the information, which really actually leads perfectly into accurate reporting, but not necessarily thinking about it as I'm gonna come in and run a report, but kind of linking that to user productivity. Thinking about how does the information get pushed to the user? How does the information get pushed to the customer? Where there's not necessarily as many processes that we need to run. And again, really thinking about in terms of accurate reporting, but what are the lead and lag indicators? Lead indicators could speak to the amount of activity that's leading up, if configured right, that's leading up to using some smart AI around conversion rates and pipelines. To lag indicators would be is the month end is closed and we need to understand a complete and accurate summary of the month's both customer activities plus financial activities. Any additional thoughts you want to add on those 2 points?
I think this customer-centric approach that is depicted here is very, very important, because if we see the Salesforce philosophy as well, it revolves around the customer, right? They say customer experience is what we sell, right? And I think it's whether we talk about any product, Rob, or whether we talk about uh, any real life scenarios, it's your experience that helps you trust a system, right? So if you have got that smooth, seamless experience with any system, you will just get attached to it very quickly, and it would be very hard for you to just leave that system. So with Salesforce, since it has just become a digital transformation platform where you can just have a 360-degree view of your customer, I think you can see a broader picture. Maybe marketing team can see what sales team is doing, and then sales team can actually derive information on what the matured leads are, how they have been nurtured by the marketing team. And then it will actually help them close the deals much faster because they understand the customer or the prospect better. Because the information is flowing, right? It's the communication is happening. And I think if communication is happening between different silo systems, it makes life very, very easy, right? And obviously, you if you are able to communicate with your members and provide them that kind of personal touch with your system, obviously they will love that, right? And if they love your system, I don't think so they are going to go anywhere out of it, right? It's more like you have a particular vendor whom you prefer for maybe your car servicing or anything, and till the time you are satisfied with that service provider, I don't think so you shift gears and you search somewhere else. So I think if we are able to provide that kind of member experience through the Salesforce adoption process, I think we have achieved customer success.
Which speaks, without even calling it out, you spoke perfectly to the other 2 points around revenue and member experience. And what I'd like to just add into to say what, to add on to what you said, was also just, as we look at platforms and we look at the ability to achieve everything within these 4 pillars, one of the advantages that Salesforce has is the developers, the community of developers that have really supported the growth and robust features for this platform. And that's something that really speaks volumes in terms of being able to customize the platform for your own business needs without actually having to go out and build endless custom processes. Because the application market for Salesforce is quite robust and actually would fit perfectly within these 4 pillars of user productivity, accurate reporting, revenue, and member experience.
Yeah, that's true.
So as we look to the next slide, we've spoken to all the reasons why Salesforce can help an organization, can grow with an organization, and really and be that platform to drive future goals. But it is important to touch on the potential of why would the Salesforce adoption fail, and that unfortunately a failure in adopting as an organization has not only the potential to disrupt the customer experience. It puts the internal team frustrations at risk, which can ultimately lead to people leaving the organization and setting back an organization potentially a year to 2 years on all the great work that would have been done to adopt it. And so, I think if we were to just broadly say, why does a Salesforce adoption fail? It really talks to, I think the first and foremost is probably failing to engage not only the right people within the organization for proper understanding and planning of how the system should work as it's being implemented, but really carrying that through throughout all the processes that align with the key outcomes of the organizations. And that really, I mean, in a very simple manner, speaks to not necessarily having done the due diligence up front of a proper discovery process to say, here's our workflow from start to finish. Again, leveraging that super user group, and really taking the time to understand what are the potential pitfalls, what are the potential over customizations that just are you can't really translate them from an old system to a new, because another very common fail point is where someone doesn't necessarily take the time to understand what the new system can do, as we talked about that optimization and understanding. Taking all the old processes and just shoving them into a new system, which ultimately leads to over customization, and not necessarily designed in the same manner that the developer community that we just spoke of works and has worked to create these business functionalities. But really kind of taking that head down, eyes closed approach into developing the processes to the user interface, to the customer experience.
Yeah, and I think Rob, what happens is when you are implementing a new system, like we're talking about Salesforce here. So when you are implementing it, I think people or everyone thinks that it's a new system and it's the responsibility of the technical team or the implementation team to get the work done. Okay. So we tell them that this is our system. This is Salesforce. Now just implement it and let us know how much time will it take. Okay. And then it's upon the technical team to get everything done. Now, what we are missing here, or what business users are missing here, or the technical team misses, is that we are actually implementing the system for the existing users who are using either an old system or they do not have any system to work upon. Mm-hmm. So they are the real users who would be using the new system. And they are the ones who understand the existing system. And they are the ones who actually understand the data that lies within the system. Mm-hmm. Now, the technical team or the vendor that you have hired or a development partner that you have hired, he is actually new to the system. He knows steps 1 to 5, that this is how the migration will happen. I will do data field mapping. I will do this. I will do this. And then your system is implemented. Take it and start using it. Now, what we forget is that system is not just about implementing new modules. It's about the underlying data that lies within the system. And that data only the business users understand. So I will tell you an example where we were implementing Salesforce for one of our clients. And one of the things we actually do is do a lot of discovery sessions with the business users. And we searched their database and we found out that there are around 100,000 records that have to be migrated to Salesforce from their old system. Now, we estimated it out. And then after a lot of discovery sessions with the different departments from the marketing team, sales team, we found out that a lot of data that is lying within the system has not been used for the last 10 years. And it's all historical data, which they don't need right now. They're not actively using it. And when we finally had our discovery sessions, we came up with the conclusion that out of those 100,000 records, only 45,000 records are the ones that need to be migrated. 55,000 records can just stay where they are, or we just need to archive that data for audit purpose. we don't need to migrate it, right? So ultimately what happened was, because we were talking to the subject matter experts, we reduced the effort from 100,000 to 45,000, which is more than 50% of the effort.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that actually helped, not in only in reducing the effort, but also engaging with the business users and make them understand about the new system. So I think if we are able to engage those kind of experts right at the start, I think we have solved half of our problem.
And you bring up a really great point on the data, and another thing in terms of just how far back you go, and really that depends on, I know that's going to depend on the business model in some cases, if particularly if it's a membership and you allow multi-year membership purchase options, but this is also a great opportunity to examine the amount of data fields that were created in the old system, and what needs to be carried forward. And I know in my experience, I think that roughly speaking, we had 100 plus data fields in our old system that same amount we cut down by more than half as we brought it into Salesforce. And oftentimes it's when, along the way, and there's turnover in administrators, but someone says, I need to report on something, a particular data element that may not exist in the system, and someone in an unstructured environment says, we can add that data field. And there may not have been that previous knowledge of the number one is really what's the key outcome that you're trying to answer. But two is a fluid understanding of the data in the system. Do we already have it? Are we creating duplicate fields? And then what is the means of how data actually flows back into the system once you're there? Because if it doesn't have that proper onboarding into Salesforce, it allows for it'll compromise not only the user experience, and perhaps it's two people, same person with two different logins, can't get into a system, to financial transactions, to critical reporting at the end. And I'll say I'm going to lean back again to the importance of having a subject matter expert internally, and particularly in depending on the industry, depending on the type of organization, and in the case of, I know, associations where a very common application within Salesforce is Fonteva. Having those subject matter experts to be able to help you navigate that, because the whole idea of taking on a platform of this magnitude, thinking that you can train an internal team to adapt to it along the way, to me that's something that you want to avoid at all costs. And I'll say that, just speaking back to my history, having worked with many Salesforce resources, I've actually had personal experience working with a Plusify during my time at PCMA, and I know that they're still working with PCMA as really those subject matter experts, not only in the Salesforce, but the specific nonprofit and association space, to be able to help navigate a team and present those critical points and to the specific points raised about the data, about the process. But it really is, when we say failing to engage the experts, that is a critical step right there.
That's true. And I think when we were doing this PCMA project, it was a very, very collaborative effort between your team and our team, and chalking down things, getting to the deep of it, and then implementing the process systematically and gradually. And it actually helped, right? And we had minimum live issues, and we were in control of things. And I think it was a great teamwork, which is a great learning for our other clients as well.
It is, and the team was an extension of our team. It wasn't PCMA and a Plusify. It was a very collaborative effort, and we really, I'll say that we relied on your team to that train the trainer model, because while we had a couple of Salesforce resources internally. I think the other thing that's probably not necessarily considered, and this is more just based on the experience, is the amount of resources it takes to manage a platform like this. Because it is, I mean, if you're, if a technology team is supporting an entire organization, you have to manage the now help desk questions that come up, to the future development needs for whether it's changes to the membership model, whether it's an event that's being launched and you're integrating in a third-party platform, to that there's scheduled upgrades that are coming through the system. So being able to have that divide and conquer mentality with the proper resources is really mission critical to future success.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Rob.
So when we look at the migration specifically, you have a very complex equation, and we actually just kind of spoke to that. Is that you've got the now, you've got to keep the lights on, you've got to keep the system running, and there are daily, weekly, monthly tasks associated to every aspect of the business, and making sure that we're attending to the customers and user experience while taking on a migration. And when you blend those two worlds, it becomes very challenging. But that also again speaks back to the team you might be employing internally versus the subject matter experts that you're deploying externally outside the organization. And there's having been through many migrations, when you're trying to blend those two worlds, what happens is you get a lot of confusion, you get a lot of misunderstandings of what is current state versus future state, and you become time starved. And maybe I'll just maybe speak from my experiences. One of the most critical things that we really have to focus on, aside of mapping out the new processes, making sure that we're taking care of, taking advantage of the best and the newest technology out there. But the time that you're going to take to migrate data from one system to the other, and then the time you're going to take for the user acceptance training, getting the different team members in the new system and separating out their existing to making sure that with every change the expected outcome is as you planned, and then to the new user training. For that, going back to the whole onboarding, making sure that the adoption across the organization is critical. And I think being starved for time, many organizations being understaffed, overwhelmed with tasks. This is where the two tend to blend, because you're trying to do more with less. But the critical nature of engaging support on that, I think, is a make or break decision point for a migration.
Yeah, I think Rob, when we are actually migrating the data, it is about not just one system; it is about two systems in which. So one is the source system and one is the target system. Mm-hmm. And it's very important to understand the structure of both the systems, right? So it's like you are living in a 3-room house, and then you suddenly plan to move to a 4-bedroom house with different facilities. Now, if you have not understood the structure of those two houses, right? So you should plan that all the things that I have in room 1 will actually go to room X in the target system. All the commodities or all the goods that I have in room 2 will actually go to room number 4 in house 2. If you don't plan that and we just suddenly migrate, what will happen is you will just pack on your goods and luggage and move to the new house, and then you exactly don't know where to put in what, right? And you'll just dump it in one place, uh, and without knowing where to actually organize things or where to arrange data. And then it's a complete mess because we have dumped the system, and then you will take another 1 month to just settle down and move the things within that same house. I think that is the same with the source system and target system. Unless you understand what needs to be migrated from the source system to target system and from which field it has to be migrated to which field, if you don't do that, then that entire migration would actually be a shocking activity and will result in a big mess.
No, 100%. And I think just to add on to that, really what we're talking about is making sure that you are engaging those subject matter experts to make sure that outcome is crystal clear, and that in many cases it's not uncommon for the underlying infrastructure to change slightly, particularly around maybe how the finances were handled. It could have changes to a GL for reporting. So, making sure that each department is intimately involved in this process is very important. So and I think we're seeing a common theme here, and that is the word data, and making sure that because the world operates on data, decisions are made on data. Particularly as the world focuses on that one-to-one communication, that personalized user experience. Data is everything, and so from taking that time for a proper mapping, what are the rules of engagement, to actually putting real use cases against those rules of engagement, testing that out to identify the validity from old system to new. What potential pitfalls are you gonna incur because either the functionality in the old doesn't exist in the new, or the new system has been upgraded, to really the expected outcome on reporting and user experience. Is the user going to have the same access to information that they were used to having before? Is the user interface changing, and data that while still available may have changed? What are the exceptions that you had in the old system that were manually processed and carried through, that haven't necessarily been thought through in the old? What are those? And quite often when you go through that migration, 95% of your data is great, and then you've got that 5% exception rule that when you're reviewing it with the team that's helping you with the upgrade, it's quite possible that you might spend more time on those few exceptions than you did in many of the other cases of testing out the data processes to make sure that they work.
Yeah, I think those 5% exceptions are very, very important, because I think those 5% exceptions are the ones which create 80% of the problems when we move to live. So if we are able to maybe spend time on that, do a lot of cleansing activity before we migrate from one system to another, I think that would help us out. Because even if you say that you have got 100,000 records, and out of which 10%, maybe 10,000 records are like broken records, which may have missing emails, which may have inconsistent format in terms of currency, then if you're not cleaning that data and correcting it, then what is happening is we are just putting in that 10% garbage from one system to another system. So initially we had just 10,000 records which were bad, now we have got 20,000 records because those data is in two systems. So we have doubled our problem. So it's better to spend some time and clean that stuff so that we don't triple or double our problems after migration.
Yeah, no, and that maybe you could call it the sleeping dragon, something that is so critically important, but often sometimes just never given enough attention. And in many cases, someone might say, we can proceed forward. We'll deal with that. We'll deal with that in the new system. But that speaks to exactly your point of you've doubled your problems now, because not only are you dealing it within the old system, but the new system as well. So the next slide, really talks. It's kind of the continuation, but running the tests. We spoke just a little bit about this in terms of user acceptance training, and really, what does that mean? Quite often there's an understanding that if we're going through a migration, if we're onboarding, there's a series of tests that you go through to make sure that what the expected outcome in the old matches the expected outcome in the new system. But just really wanting to highlight that it doesn't stop there. The importance of maintaining a group internally that, as patches are applied, as platforms are upgraded, going through and making sure that you have that checklist that applies to every single area, and that there's a thorough testing job done before anything's done. And maybe this is also a great time to point out that the importance of testing in a sandbox versus the live environment is also mission critical, because it's not necessarily uncommon that individuals that may not be as technically savvy or subject matter expert around the platform understands the underlying infrastructure of sandbox versus live environment. But having that sandbox set up, having the proper testing, evaluating, reporting back, making sure that exceptions and all reports are validated before doing anything or pushing anything to a live environment.
And I think that point about sandbox is a very good point, Rob, because most of the times it's, I think, a myth that migration is just copying data from one system to another, right? And people think that it's just copying of data from one live system to another live system. And they forget that the data that they're migrating has to be tested, and it cannot be tested directly on live system. There should be a proper UAT environment or maybe a sandbox environment where we actually do some kind of testing, figure out maybe, and business users should actually do it because they are the ones who understand that data. Mm-hmm. So we should involve them in sandbox testing, get the issues sorted out, and then once we have got sign-offs, maybe then move that data into production. And I think data migration, again, should be a phase-wise process, right? When we are saying that we have to migrate maybe 50,000 records, I think what we should do is divide that data into different parts. Maybe we just say that we will just first migrate 100 records, test it out, and see if our scripts are working. Because what will happen is it's easy to test a small set of data rather than testing 50,000 records at once. And that would actually ease the process of refining your scripts, reducing the testing time. And if you are able to sort out the issues for 100 records, maybe then we can push it to 1,000 records, 2,000 records. And once we are completely confident that our scripts are good, I think then we should actually go for a full-blown migration to sandbox.
Agreed. And there's one other point that I think is good for this particular topic is backup too, because ultimately something has the potential to go wrong, And so, a sandbox is a great environment to have a backup in it, but it's not really the only thing that you should be doing for backup, because it through the process, and particularly if someone isn't properly using a sandbox, I've seen it where data files actually get wiped out, and not on purpose, because it's never, no one's ever intending to do that, but having that proper infrastructure in place that's continuously making copies of the Salesforce environment, and being able to restore with a couple clicks of a system. Because I think there's, at least my perception is that there could be a very common misunderstanding that because Salesforce is cloud-based, the data is always saved. It's never going to go away. But do you have any experience where you've worked with clients and this has happened?
Yeah, I think we have got a couple of cases where we have the data has not been backed up, and the migration has been done, and it has been a nightmare. But thankfully, we were able to recover the data from various sources. But it's a tough job if you don't have a backup, right? Because getting the data and all this client data, member data, right, is very, very crucial for your business. We didn't had a backup for the sandbox. Thankfully, we had a backup for the production environment. But that was a good learning for us, that everything has to be backed up before we do any kind of migration, whether it's a small migration or a big migration. We need to be safe, and data has to be backed up.
And that's I think an often forgotten point, but mission critical. So that brings us, to the end of the talking points that we wanted to walk through. But would love to open up to the group if anyone has any questions. There was one submitted that asked, how long should one organization expect for a proper onboarding and migration to take?
I think when we talk about migration, Rob, it depends on various factors. It actually depends on how much custom code that we have in the existing org. It depends on how many records that we have in the database. And it obviously depends on how much bad data that we have in our system. Because like we talked in the previous slides, data quality is very important, and it's most of the times missed that we just migrate everything from one system to another. So if we are able to treat migration as a separate project and do these kind of analysis on different use cases, I think that would actually help us estimate realistically on how much time it's going to migrate the system. But if we talk about a plain vanilla migration, we assume that data is correct, there is no custom code. I'm assuming that it takes around 3 months to implement a system and another 3 to 6 months for user adoption. So we roughly talk about an entire year where you will mark your system as a success, where every user is actually working and adopted the system.
And I think to that point, and just for those who might not have gone through this, it doesn't mean that you're working in 2 live systems simultaneously. We speak to there is a clear cutover point, that you'll go from one system to the other. But from a timing standpoint, to your point, depending on the variety of factors, there will be a tremendous amount of that time spent developing the new system and testing before any cutover and any changeover of systems. And one other question came in was from a customer standpoint. Do customers tend to know when you're moving from one system to the other, and is it disruptive to the user experience?
I think we as a development partner, support that communication should be very, very effective. And if we are migrating a system, customers have the right to know that something is getting migrated, because if we don't tell them and they face unexpected issues, right, that results in a loss of trust from them, right? Because they are trusting you, they are trusting your system, they expect an open communication of whether it's bad or good, it doesn't matter. But communication has to be transparent. Okay, because if there is no communication, then I know it's bad. You cannot label it as good. So I think we should not worry about disruption. We should just inform our customers well in advance that they may experience problems. And if they may, then we should also provide a solution in terms of they can contact this number, they can approach on this email ID. So we should be ready to support them as well. And if you're able to do that, I think customers would be with you.
Correct. And in my experience, at least, proactive communication and frequent communication tends to trump even if there are issues that occur. The other, and one thing just maybe to think about, as you do communicate out and thinking about the user experience, is depending on the migration, depending on stored payments, that might be one area, and I've seen it kind of flip both ways, is, do you carry over critical information from one system or the other, or do you take that opportunity to communicate with your customers, your audience, and say, we've upgraded systems. Here are the 10 benefits of the new system that you're gonna be able to utilize. But in recognizing, and you could take the approach that if you're not carrying over, personal information of critical nature, like a payment, you could touch on that, for the security of your information, we've chosen not to migrate old card information to new, and give them the opportunity to update that. So it's, there's a variety of different ways that you can handle it, really thinking through what the user has inputted, what is carrying through, what isn't. That's all critical to that process. And so that brings us to the end of today's session. We want to thank everyone for attending, and thanks for the questions, and thanks for allowing us to have this conversation. It's something that I think we're passionate about. We're passionate because we know it's tied to organizational success, and really the success of individuals to the organization. So if there are any questions after this, please feel free to either look us up on LinkedIn, to find us either on LinkedIn or through our company websites. But would love to continue this conversation. We would love to be a resource for everyone that's attending, to help them through their journey, or just answer questions, whatever that might look like. So, all right. Anything else, Niraj, that you might want to close out with?
I think it was a great conversation, Rob, and I think we have touched the major points. I think my last piece of advice to everyone would be that whenever you are planning to do a migration, or maybe working on user adoption for Salesforce, just be a little patient. Give yourself time to think through things, and do a collaborative effort between the business team and the technical team and other stakeholders. I think that is the key to success. Once we have gained that user confidence and the stakeholder confidence, I think most of the battle is won. Agreed.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Niraj, and we will talk. We'll talk again soon.
Sure. Thank you.
All right.
Have a good night,
Thank
everyone.
you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.